Hello and welcome to the world's biggest military air show, the Royal International Air Tattoo. We're back at Fairford after a 2-year absence. In that time, the show has been held at Cottesmore while major reconstruction work was carried out here. But this is RIAT's traditional home, and its homecoming has certainly been a truly memorable event. In this video, we'll be looking at some of the highlights from 2 days of action, both in the air and on the ground. It's exactly 60 years since the American 8th Air Force entered the war in Europe. And the Americans are here in strength today with modern jets like the strange B-2 and the B-52, still going strong after half a century. We'll be paying tribute to the bomber crews so often seen in the shadow of the fighter pilots. They carried out some of the most heroic acts in the history of warfare, and they're remembered in a special section of the display. We'll be seeing some of the world's great aerobatic teams. Los Halcones from Chile are here for the first time in 9 years. And just to show that pilots are human, we'll have full and exclusive coverage of that G222 and its very short landing. You won't see these pictures anywhere else. That's all to come, but we start with some great action from the Spanish national display team, and to describe it, here's Sean Maffett.
Well, this is the Patrulla Águila, the Team Eagle of the Spanish Air Force. In their Casa 101 training aircraft, with the red and yellow colour scheme, the national colours of Spain. This is a view from a camera mounted on the helmet of one of the pilots. And this is the view of the team leader as he sits in his cockpit at the front of the aircraft. The team all take off together. All 7 of them on the runway at the same time. And here's the view from the number 5 aircraft. Manoeuvring to get into position so that they can start off with their first formation shape, which will eventually be the wedge. This aircraft is right in the middle of the formation, so he really has to trust his colleagues. As they pull up into the loop, we're looking back on the face and helmet of the leader. There they are, pulling over the top of the loop and coming down vertically on the other side. And at the end of this manoeuvre, we'll see them do what they call their 3-step brake. Now here we are back with number 5, Captain Ismael Serrano, and he's doing the solo aerobatic part of the display. And here he is upside down, about to do a manoeuvre that's quite unusual for a jet aerobatic team. This is about 3/4 of an outside loop. He's on the outside of this, and he's getting lots of negative G. He's pushing the aircraft over the top of that loop until he gets it into the vertically down position, adjusting slightly because he's gone off the display line a little, and then pulling out of that manoeuvre. Now we're back with the leader, Major Fernandez, as he sends off aircraft in twos to do the barrel roll over the delta formation. They pull up out of the formation, they each do a synchronized barrel roll, and then they pull back into the formation in the position in which they started. When the Red Arrows do this, they call it rollbacks. And there are the last two pulling back into position. The Casa 101 is a Spanish-built advanced trainer aircraft, somewhat equivalent to the British Hawk, but with only roughly half the power, which of course makes it much more difficult for them to fly formation aerobatics, because you need power to help you keep in position, and that just means that this team really are very good at what they do. The Patrulla Aguila has been flying since 1985, and they're based at San Javier in the province of Murcia in southeastern Spain.
Well, this year, the Royal International Air Tattoo returns to Fairford after a 2-year absence. The intervening shows were held at RAF Cottesmore, while major work was carried out here to improve the runway and aprons. The result leaves Fairford well prepared for its 21st century role as a NATO standby base. And visitors to the site will have noticed many changes. For the first time, many of the aircraft taking part in the flying display are operating from the south side of the airfield, nearer the crowds. Meanwhile, the static park is larger than ever. In the days before the event, more than 400 aircraft flew in from every corner of the world. And this one brought a celebrity. The actress Claire Sweeney arrived in an RAF Tornado. She's been chosen as the official sweetheart of the British Armed Forces. This was her first ride in a fast jet, and for Claire it was quite an experience.
It was like the most dangerous fairground ride ever. But I felt safe. I felt very safe. I was in the safe hands of Derek, the pilot, and I felt very, very safe indeed. But just emotions that my body's never experienced before. The G-force and blacking out slightly and just like going nose down. Quite scary, but quite exhilarating as well.
No doubt it was a trip to remember for the Tornado crews as well. They gave Claire an aerial tour of her home city, all captured on video by the navigator of another aircraft.
I went to Liverpool. We flew straight up the Mersey. I think he did me a little favour doing that. And we went past my flat on the left and he gave the wings a little tip waving at my flat. I went over to my mum's house. It was great.
For those who took a less exotic route to Fairford, it was a somewhat slower journey. Security checks caused further delays. With the terrorist threat in mind, it was decided that all spectators should be searched. Whether this will happen in future years remains to be seen. But most people were cheerfully patient. Once inside the site, the magic of this unique occasion takes over. Besides being the biggest military air show in the world, this is one of the country's largest charity events, raising millions of pounds for the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund. It's also a showcase for the aerospace industry and a social occasion for the crews. Though many of the air arms are used to working together, they meet here in a more relaxed atmosphere. It's a friendly show. Meanwhile, from the enthusiast point of view, it's a chance to see some of the world's most brilliant pilots doing what they do best. So let's get on with the flying action.
Now here's Major Paul Rorive of the Belgian Air Force, psyching himself up for his flying display. He's going to do it in the extraordinary little French-built Fouga Magister. It's a little trainer, the 50 on the side indicating how old this aircraft is. And that extraordinary thing on the top is actually a periscope, so that the instructor who sits behind the pupil can see, because he can't normally see over the pupil's head in front of him. Two tiny little jet engines of only 880 pounds of static thrust each power this aeroplane, so by modern standards it's very underpowered. And in fact, Paul is going to talk us through his display.
Fouga Magister is a very old trainer. It was used in the Belgian Air Force as from the year 60, so it's a rather old aircraft. And for those who remember, the first flight took place in 52. Now I'm releasing brakes after checking every instruments, and the problem with this aircraft is the acceleration. So first I'm accelerating to 60 knots. At 60 knots I'll lift up the nose wheel, and we are reaching now 90 knots, and the aircraft goes airborne. You won't see the aircraft really going airborne because I stay very low on the runway, about 1 to 2 meters above the runway. The gear is up, the flaps are coming up at 130 knots, and the aircraft is accelerating until the end of the runway. I expect to have about 160, 170 knots at the end of the runway. And now I'm going to start pulling up about 20 to 30 degrees up, and the speed is of course decreasing at that time, decreasing to 130 knots. Now I'm going to make a turn to the right, positioning myself and trying to come back about 45 degrees from the crowd. So I'm trying to position myself, turning, finding the flying datum or the display datum, and rolling out now in front of the public. Preparing myself for the first loop, and here we go. Pulling about 4 Gs, and now I will rotate the aircraft 90 degrees to line up myself with the display line. Always looking to the horizon first, to be wings level on top of the loop, and now adjusting my back pressure up to 6 Gs now to be back level at 500 feet. Rolling inverted and pushing now 2.5 Gs, 3 Gs, going for an inverted split S. The most important is to keep the wings level, looking at the speed. The speed is decreasing, and reaching 2,500 feet I start pulling again to position myself, looking for the display datum and lining up myself. Again 6 Gs at the recovery, ending up at 500 feet. And now we're going to start with the 4-point roll. 1, 1001, 1002, 2, 1001, 1002, 3, 1001, 1002, 4, 1001, 1002. Immediately wings level, pulling up again.
Major Paul Rorive and the Fouga Magister. Now, the same vintage as the Fouga Magister, in fact it celebrated its 50th birthday last year, is the Hawker Hunter. This thing has 6 times the power of the Fouga Magister. Flown for us today by Rod Dean, who now works for the Civil Aviation Authority, but he used to fly in 43 Squadron, and this aircraft, the FGA-6, the Fighter Ground Attack 6 version of the Hunter, is in the colours of 43 Squadron. There are the checkers on the rear fuselage. Hunter, one of the classic jets of British aviation. One time the holder of the world's speed record of 727 and a bit miles an hour. It's one of those aircraft of which it's said, if it looks right, it probably is, and pilots have always loved the Hunter. It's a real hands-on aeroplane with magnificent flying and handling abilities.
Prince Faisal of Jordan gets his first look at the newest aircraft here. This is the Pilatus PC-21. It flew for the first time 3 weeks before the show, and it's come to Fairford with just 10 hours of flight time. The PC-21 is a military trainer. It's the latest example of a turboprop designed to handle like a jet, but with much lower operating costs. There are several aircraft that do this. The Pilatus PC-7 has been around for some time, and that's been displaying here. Another example is the Tucano, which is flown by the RAF. That too has been successful. But although the Tucano can introduce the student to the handling qualities of a small jet, its cockpit and systems are very different to those you would find in a modern fighter. The PC-21 takes the concept one stage further. It has an electronic or glass cockpit, and its systems can be configured to simulate those of the type the student will eventually fly.
I think the major difference is the avionics in the aircraft. We have basically got a fighter-style cockpit with the three displays that you can see here, with the input up-front control panel and a head-up display, which is emulating fighter operations. And with the mission computer, which has at the moment more computing power than Eurofighter's mission computer, we are able to simulate any fighter cockpit or display system that is following on after this aircraft.
Prince Faisal is himself a pilot and has flown at this show. In 1999, he took part in a moving tribute to the late King Hussein when he flew his father's de Havilland Dove in formation with the extra 300s of the Royal Jordanian Falcons. This is what he had to say about the PC-21.
Pilatus is a good company, a very good reputation. They've made a lot of aircraft. And I think in training circles, to be able to deal with glass cockpit at an earlier stage makes a lot of sense on an aircraft that's a lot cheaper to run than jets. And so it's more economical and more efficient, and whatever money can be saved from that can be put to other uses.
There was no chance of the PC-21 displaying here so early in its test programme. That may happen next year. But the weekend crowds did at last get a chance to see it fly. After 2 days taking pride of place in the static park, it set off on the short flight to the Farnborough show. The aircraft promises sparkling performance. It has a top speed of 370 knots in level flight, and it's stressed to +8 and -4G. So it should put on an impressive aerobatic show. Certainly we can expect to see a lot more of the PC-21 in future.
Now here's an aircraft with some tight security, never very far from an armed guard. This is the F-117 Nighthawk, the stealth fighter. And even when it's taxiing to the runway, it still has its armed guards in close proximity. It's 20 years old, this aircraft now. It went into United States Air Force service in 1982, but it still looks quite extraordinary. All those flat facets on the aircraft, nothing curved. And the extraordinary shape, looking completely sinister. Carries two 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs, smart bombs, inside the aircraft rather than underneath the aircraft, because if they were underneath, that would completely take away its stealthy capabilities. It would then become visible on radar. No surfaces closer to the vertical than 30 degrees, all part of the anti-radar package that makes this thing more or less invisible to most radars. And although this is an American aircraft, and a very high security one as we've seen, it is flown by a Royal Air Force exchange officer, Squadron Leader Link Taylor. And in fact this was his last show, because he has since been posted to become the Eurofighter Requirements Manager for the Royal Air Force. But the Brits are the only people who have exchange officers on the stealth aircraft squadrons, other than Americans. And there's the big braking parachute, and Link is turning politely to blow the parachute off the runway, because if it drops onto the runway, then of course somebody has to clear the runway before the next aircraft can use it. And there it is, that's tight security, back again with the aircraft as he taxis off. He's once again surrounded by armed guards, perhaps a measure of the seriousness with which the United States takes its security post September the 11th. Now here's an aircraft with an even higher degree of security. This one is so important that it has to be escorted when it's in the air. This is the B-2A Spirit, the stealth bomber, and it's escorted by 4 F-15 fighters scrambled from Lakenheath in Britain to meet it. Because this aircraft has come directly from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. It's flown across the Atlantic, it's been refueled in mid-air, and once it's done its flypast here at Fairford, it'll be refueled again and then again before it gets back to its base. It's a 20-hour flight for this aircraft to come and display here at the Royal International Air Tattoo. But in fact, some of these crews, when they're on operations, have flown as long as 33 hours to get to Afghanistan and back from their base in Missouri. Now, this third aircraft in the triumvirate of US strike aircraft is here, like the B-2 and the F-117, to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the 8th Air Force. They all belong to that Air Force. And the 8th served with great distinction in Britain during the Second World War with its B-17s and B-24 Liberators. But this, the B-1B Lancer, is from the 28th Bomb Squadron at Dyess Air Force Base in Texas, and we can go on board the aircraft there. A crew of 4, as opposed to the 2 people on board the B-2 stealth bomber. They have 2 pilots and 2 weapons systems operators. There we can see the wings are much more swept than they were. The outboard sections sweep back to 67.5 degrees of sweep. That's for when the aircraft is travelling at high speed. It can do more than 600 knots, that's 900 feet per second at low level. As they say, faster than a speeding bullet. The view between the 2 pilots from the seats of the weapons systems operators. And now a slow fly past from the B-1B. The wings fully forward with only 15 degrees of sweep back, and you can see the droops on the leading edge. Those are the low-speed handling parts that allow the wing to develop more lift when it's going at slow speed, and the flaps on the trailing edge. Full reheat power on those GE engines. 30,000 pounds each, those engines are developing. At height, this aircraft can do more than 1 1/4 times the speed of sound. And it can carry 24 JDAM weapons, that's Joint Direct Attack Missiles. And those little winglets on the nose, those are there to help smooth its path at low level when it's doing high speed. Tailplane fully up, and the air brakes out on the wings to slow the aircraft down as it completes its landing run. Well, now here's another F-15. We saw them escorting the B-2 bomber a few minutes back. This one's going to do its own solo display. It's also from Lakenheath in the east of England. LN meaning Lakenheath. But it's not flown by a Lakenheath pilot, it's flown by the West Coast demonstration team. But I'll let the pilot introduce himself.
I'm Captain Lindy Reniger with the United States Air Force West Coast demonstration team out of Eglin Air Force Base in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. My call sign is Alamo. Right off the bat in the F-15C model, we're going to go 5 stages of afterburner, or as you guys call it, reheat. And at approximately 180 knots, I'm going to go full aft stick deflection here and basically just rip the jet off of the runway and climb out. You can see beautiful Fairford in the background as we climb away. I'm climbing out about 220 knots, which is going to give me approximately 70 degrees nose high with the 220 motors that I have on board. And I'm looking to roll the airplane at 4,500 feet. We had a weather deck between 5,000 and 5,500 today. I didn't know that till I got up there, so we were actually just able to stay out of the weather here. We roll back down for a split S, and that's still about 220 knots, and it's a straight pull through the vertical, and you can see the good contrails coming off the just to the right and left of the intakes. as we come back down. In the descent, I'm looking to level off at 500 feet initially and accelerate to 0.92 Mach, which is the fastest I can go here in England. And then I will eventually lower it down to 300 feet, which is my absolute minimum for the United States Air Force, just 300 feet. And I go by the crowd there at 0.92 Mach. As you see, it went by pretty fast. Then it's about an 8G turn to reposition the aircraft. And then I'm going to see I'm going to do a couple aileron rolls here as we reposition for the next maneuver. It's a beautiful day. Weather about, like I said, 5,500 feet, so it was the low show that we're doing. So the next maneuver as we come back in, and again under about 7.5 G for the return to show center, I'm looking to capture 400 knots and then 500 feet above the ground for the 4-point roll. I pause about 1 second is my goal between the 4-point roll, and I raise the nose about 3 to 4 degrees just to keep the nose track above the horizon. So we'll see how it looks here. So maybe a little bit quick, but it looked like it was definitely at the 90, 180, 270, and pretty good degrees, but it might have been a little fast for me today. But still a good scene of Fairford in the background. And again, there's a reposition out, back away from the field to come back in. We'll do another rudder type reposition here. And now I'm starting to contact the Heritage pilots.
What he's talking about is the United States Air Force Heritage Flight. And 2 aircraft flown here by Ed Shipley and Steve Hinton, the P-51 Mustang and the P-47 Thunderbolt. Now, the Heritage Flight flies with the F-15 and these 2 aircraft, or these 2 aircraft types, about 135 flights a year. Other pilots that have been involved have included such famous names as Chuck Yeager, Frank Borman, Bill Anders and Bud Anderson. And shortly we'll see these 2 magnificent World War II aircraft, which incidentally have been borrowed from Duxford for the occasion, flying with the F-15 Eagle.
You can see me looking for them desperately here as they're inbound. It doesn't even look like I'm flying the airplane, does it? I'm just trying to find out where they are because they're going extremely slow compared to me. A little bit of touch of the weather there, and that was because I was too busy looking for the Heritage pilots. I'm going to come aboard the left side. They are going down the runway right now, and I'm going to kind of chase them down the runway and give them a knife edge pass to the crowd as I fly by. The 2 Heritage pilots who are in formation, and then I'll rejoin on the left side. I will cross the P-47 under, and then you'll see a P-47 on the right side of the screen and a P-51 on the left side of the screen. There's my knife edge pass. I'm going by the warbirds here. This knife edge pass is 9 degrees of bank, about 450 knots. Okay, so I'll reposition to the left, and they are already inside of my turn, doing a left out from the end of the runway. Funny thing here is I'm about 500 knots, and they are about 190 knots. So you really have to kind of make a good transition as a pilot here. The Heritage Flight program started in 1997. It was a way to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Air Force, and the crowd liked it so much that we continue to do it, and it's gotten better and better every year. We have a conference in February where we go train with everybody, and you can see how excited I am to see those 2 World War II warbirds above on my wings. It's a dream come true for me to see that out there. On the right side of the screen, he's on my left wing, is Steve Hinton flying the P-47. On my right wing, or on the left side of the screen there, that's Ed Shipley, a civilian Heritage pilot. He is flying the P-51 Mustang from the Blue Nose Bastards there at Duxford. Beautiful paint job on both the airplanes. And it's tough to fly the F-15 when you're too busy looking at how awesome those warbirds look on your wings. What we're going to do, flying about 190 to 200 knots, actually accelerating a little bit downhill here. Sun's starting to get in my face as the clouds move. Actually, the clouds are moving in, it's making it harder to see. So coming downhill back to show center, about 230 knots, I believe, is actually what I get with these warbirds. And the limiting factor tends to be the P-47 there on the left wing. He's the slower of the 2 warbirds. The Mustang can definitely hang at those type of airspeeds. And again, man, you can see how awesome that looks and how good they look.
They certainly do. Totally awesome. And in fact, the P-51 Mustang and the P-47 Thunderbolt were both famous as escort fighters for the daylight bombing raids that were carried out mainly by the B-17 Fortresses and the B-24 Liberators over Germany. One of the interesting things about this formation is that the F-15 comes from the 48th Wing at Lakenheath. During World War II, the 48th Squadron flew P-47s.
Well, still on the theme of the mighty US Air Force, we're now going to look at an aircraft which has never served with any other air arm. The B-52 was designed to lead America's long-range bomber force. It's taken part in every major conflict involving that country for almost half a century. When it first flew in 1952, aircraft like the Piston Mustang and the Thunderbolt were still in service. The B-52 was seen then as the future, and you could say it still is. It's expected to continue in service for at least another 20 years. And although its systems and weapons have been updated many times, it remains essentially the aircraft it was back in the days of the Cold War. Most recently, the Buff, as it's known, has been used over Afghanistan. This aircraft comes from the Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. It's flown here by Brad Voigt, who has almost 6,000 hours on type. He described those operations against the Taliban.
The experience has been that we've been very successful at what we've been doing. We've maintained a constant presence in the air over there and retained the ability to drop weapons on targets as they emerge. Even by the minute, we can have a target called to us over our communication systems and hit it within a matter of minutes.
These days, the B-52 carries 2,000-pound smart bombs. They have no propulsion system, but are guided to their target by controllable tail fins linked to a GPS receiver.
We just have to get it, drop it from a position where the tail kit can guide it to the target.
And typically, what sort of altitude would you operate from?
Well, we operate high altitude, well above any other aircraft, and higher than one would expect.
So Voigt is rather cagey about Buff operations. But he makes no secret about the aircraft's flying characteristics. They are, he says, a little old-fashioned.
It's very much a manual flying airplane. It's 50s technology, and it flies like that. The real power of this airplane is in the upgrades and the electronics and the systems that are on it, not so much the engines and how it flies. It flies the same way it flew back in 1960. You feel the airplane and you feel how it flies, and you're able to fly it very well. It's nice to fly a Legacy, and that's what it is.
Is it heavy on the controls?
Very heavy. It's not an airplane that you can fly smoothly. Generally speaking, if you try to be smooth with it, you're going to be off altitude or off airspeed.
The B-52 holds some extraordinary records. It's not fast, but its capacity as a bomber is unmatched. As long ago as the Vietnam War, the aircraft routinely carried 60,000 pounds of explosives. As part of Operation Desert Storm in the Gulf War, it conducted carpet bombing raids against Iraqi defense sites, and these were the longest strike missions in the history of aerial warfare. Refueled by tanker, the aircraft stayed airborne for 35 hours on a 16,000-mile round trip from Barksdale. And despite its huge wingspan, the aircraft can handle crosswinds of up to 50 knots. A unique and eccentric gear system allows the pilot to align the undercarriage with the runway, while the fuselage maintains its angle into wind. 50 years on, the B-52 remains an awesome war machine. As for pilot Brad Voigt, he's about to retire from the Air Force. He's buying a farm in Texas with its own airstrip, and he intends to get a Piper Cub.
And as a finale to the mighty 8th celebration, we have a formation of F-16 aircraft from Aviano in Italy, the 31st Fighter Wing. 2 squadrons of the 31st, the 510th and the 555th. And these 4 aircraft are going to perform for us a very American memorial formation known as the Missing Man. Now that all 4 aircraft are airborne, they'll get themselves into a finger 4 shape. And the aircraft on the leader's left will pull up and out of the formation. And the gap that is left signifies the airman who does not return from the combat. Now here's a nice change from all that heavy metal jet stuff. 2 Lynx HAS-3 from the Royal Navy, the Maritime Lynx Pairs display. Incidentally, you can distinguish the Navy's Lynx from the Army Lynx. The Armies have skids under them, whereas the Navy have these little supermarket trolley wheels under theirs. Also, under the middle of the fuselage, you can just see sticking out the thing that anchors these to the deck of a ship when they've landed on it in a rough sea. There's a kind of harpoon thing that sticks down into a grating on the deck and stops the helicopter falling off the deck when the ship rolls, once the helicopter has stopped flying. These aircraft are flown by Lieutenant Mark Scott from the Royal Navy, and the other pilot is Lieutenant Commander Jack Poulsen from the Royal Danish Navy. Lynx generally flies off frigates and destroyers, carry 1 pilot and 1 observer most of the time. Here they're about to do a rather violent maneuver. Well, more naval helicopter power now, and this is the very latest. This is an enormous helicopter. It's the EH-101 Merlin HM-1 from 824 Naval Air Squadron at Culdrose. That rotor is 60 foot in diameter. That's not far short of a cricket pitch. The aircraft is 74 feet long. That's, I don't know, nearly twice the size of a Harrier. And it weighs more than 14 tons. Can carry more than 5 tons on a strop underneath the aircraft. But this naval version can carry 4 homing torpedoes or depth charges. And it's got a fully automated glass cockpit. It can be flown by a single pilot. Normally have 1 pilot, 1 observer, and an aircrew person. 3-engined this aircraft, 3 Rolls-Royce Turbo Mecha turbines. It has to be very manoeuvrable, particularly in its naval version, because it can operate from ships as small as 3,000 tons, and it can take off or land in a 50-knot crosswind. So despite its size, you can really hurl this aircraft about. It's already a successful aeroplane, this, made jointly by Augusta of Italy and GKN Westland in England. 99 of these aircraft have been ordered by Japan, Canada, the UK and Italy.
Well, here's a national aerobatic team we haven't seen at Fairford since 1993. They're from Chile, and they are Los Halcones. It means the Falcons. Very nice touch here. They start their engines at exactly the same time, well, almost. Now, the last time Los Halcones were here, they won a Best of Show award, and many people think they really deserve one this time. But the fact that they didn't was probably due to a small lapse in their performance, which we'll come to in a moment. But here are the 5 aircraft preparing for takeoff. They fly the Extra 300, German-built, very strong aerobatic aircraft, stressed to +10 and -10 G. That's more than most pilots could stand for any time. This is a very light aircraft. It has a huge power-to-weight ratio, which makes it ideal for competition aerobatics. It's largely taken over in competitions from aircraft like the Pitt Special. But there aren't many teams of extra 300s. These pilots are all Air Force officers and they fly extremely close, about 6 feet, we're told, from wingtip to wingtip. And they have some lovely brakes. Of course, the extra has a very high rate of roll, and that makes it very maneuverable. Look at this. Now, some people say that on big show sites like Fairford, displays by these small aircraft are lost, but I don't think anybody who saw this one would have felt that. It really was a spectacular display, but there was one blemish. The team were flying with a problem of an on-crowd wind. That tends to take small, light aircraft away from the display line towards the crowd, and that is in fact what happened here. In fact, at one stage, the team drifted almost over the crowd, and that, of course, is not allowed for safety reasons. In fact, they were reprimanded by the Flying Control Committee. But most of the spectators would not have noticed that infringement, and they really did enjoy a wonderful show. Look at that marvellous Lomcevac. Lovely split there. And look at this, we've seen many of the jet teams draw a heart in the sky, but you don't often see it from small aircraft like this, and there goes the arrow through the heart. A real highlight of this display, but it's not the only skywriting they do, because here they come up with an immaculate star. Well, the Chileans aren't the only national display team to fly the extra 300. These are the aircraft of the Royal Jordanian Falcons. Their Fairford regulars and their country and its royal family in particular have a long history of supporting the Royal International Air Tattoo. Earlier we saw Prince Faisal admiring the PC-21. Here are his pilots preparing for their display slot. They were very much aware of the northerly on-crowd wind and the problems it can pose for aircraft like the extra.
It is a little bit difficult because you have to watch out, and the small aircraft, is pushed by the wind, and there's a lot of effect on the aircraft. So you have to be aware all the time to keep away from the crowd, start a little bit farther than the normal line, So it is a little bit difficult.
Yes, because we saw the Los Halcones, the Chilean team in the extra 300. I think they went a little bit over the crowd. That's something you must try and avoid, isn't it?
Of course, and you see other teams do it, you say that, okay, I should not do it. You have to learn from other mistakes.
And as you can imagine, they had intently watched the display by Los Halcones. A lot of competition between these teams because they do fly the same aircraft. And you can imagine they're very interested to see what the Chileans are up to these days. They wouldn't very often fly at the same show. Anyway, here are the Royal Jordanian Falcons, only 4 of these as opposed to the 5 aircraft of the Chilean team. The Falcons have been carrying out several shows in Britain this year. Besides performing at the Royal International Air Tattoo, they've been at Biggin Hill and Cosford and Sunderland and down in Cornwall to the show at Culdrose. In fact, they spend most of the summer in Europe performing because one would think that to carry out shows in the Middle East through July and August would be quite an ordeal because of the heat. But they're brought over to Europe at the start of the display season in a Hercules transport aircraft. The extras come apart, and then they're based here throughout the summer. Mohammed Zubi told me they didn't practice between displays. They obviously have a run-up to the display season back at their home base in Amman in Jordan, and then they find that these public displays are enough to keep them sharp. And certainly this performance was pretty much immaculate.
Now, a pair of aircraft that are always popular at Fairford. These are Voltige Victor, the two French Air Force Mirage F1s. These guys won the prize for the best overall flying display, the King Hussein Memorial Sword. Fortunately, we had our cameras on board to catch the whole of this immaculate display.
I'm Lieutenant Coeffin from the French Mirage F1 Patrol. I'm the Voltige Victor 2, and my leader is on my right side. So leader is Lieutenant Breton, and he's got about 2,100 hours flights, and I've got the same number of hours of flights. At this time we are taking off at about 160 knots. So I'm just looking forward and to my leader to see whether I'm taking off in front of my leader. So we are putting the gear up and then pull. So after the takeoff we'll turn right, and I will come line in a line astern. And at the formation I will maintain for about almost all the display. Public has to see about one aircraft. So we are reversing in front of public. That's the most difficult maneuver. Then we are turning, we are flying about 300 to 350 knots, and we are pulling about 4 to 5 Gs at this time. So I'm looking at the front of the Mirage F1, at the front of his nose. I have to pull the canopy between the two air intakes, the nose of the aircraft. At this time we cut AB, and then I'm coming close formation, left side. So my leader will begin the barrel, then that's my turn. And then we reverse at the same time. And I'm coming back to line astern. And then I will come to the left side during the turn to be left side for the wing flash. So I'm coming back a bit back and then going to the left side of my leader. I have to be a bit up also for visual effect, and then we wing flash, then pull to rejoin during a right barrel.
And our thanks to Lieutenant Guillaume Coeffin and his leader Lieutenant François Breton of the 333rd Fighter Squadron.
The Alenia G222. It's a tactical military transport which has been modestly successful for its makers. The Italian Air Force has more than 50 in service, and it's been sold in smaller numbers to many other air arms, notably and perhaps controversially to Libya. The aircraft is designed to operate out of short strips in a similar role to the C-130 Hercules, though of course it's much smaller and has only 2 engines. Back in the mid-90s, the show's Flying Control Committee allowed the 222 to show off its party trick. You don't often see this sort of aircraft performing a barrel roll. Such exuberance is no longer approved here, and you might say that these days this sprightly but unassuming transport is not exactly a showstopper. This year, however, it was. The crew were demonstrating a steep approach when everything went horribly wrong. It was a classic and indisputable case of pilot error, a heavy landing followed by the collapse of the nose oleo. The crew quickly evacuated the aircraft via the cargo ramp. Fire crews were on station within 2 minutes. By then the flames, caused by leaking hydraulic fluid, were mostly out. No one was hurt or seriously endangered, and that of course is the most important thing. But an incident like this at such a high-profile event is a huge embarrassment for the aircraft operators. And coming as it did quite early in the Saturday programme, it proved a headache for the show organisers, who suddenly found their single runway blocked. As lifting gear was brought in to move the 222, several aircraft already in the air were forced to divert to nearby Brize Norton. Meanwhile, the flying programme was hastily revised, using aircraft which didn't need the full runway. There was an excellent and extended gliding display, and the crew of a passing Hercules came to the rescue. A request was relayed through ATC, and suddenly they found themselves displaying at the world's biggest military air show.
We were very lucky in as much as we had more runway available than we would have expected, so a lot of the aircraft were still able to operate. We sent some of them to a different airfield and we recovered them later on, but I think there's only about 5 or 6 crews that actually didn't fly yesterday.
It must have been a bit of a headache for you and your team, though.
We had to work very hard, without a shadow of a doubt, but I was pleased with what we did. We managed to get something reasonably quickly that we managed to continue through the rest of the day.
So back now to the G222, and this aircraft is beginning to look as if it has a Fairford jinx. The last time it flew here was in 1999. On that occasion, a de-icing boot separated from the left-hand propeller, punching several holes in the fuselage. The crew said later the vibration was so bad they could hardly read the flight instruments, but they landed safely and leapt from the ramp in scenes very similar to that of the latest incident. That time, of course, no blame could be attached to the handling pilot. This year, you couldn't say the same. Let's look at that landing again. The aircraft is conducting what's known as a Khe-Sanh approach, so named after an airfield in Vietnam. The idea is to stay high for as long as possible to avoid small arms fire. But the pilot must round out in time to land on the main wheels, the strong part of the undercarriage. Here, the first landing is distinctly nose wheel heavy. But it's the second touchdown which does the damage. Every student pilot is told that on a bounced landing you must hold off the nose wheel. If the aircraft is allowed to porpoise, this can be the consequence. So are these steep approaches too risky? Is the point of roundout too critical? This is what it looks like from the flight deck of the 222, as seen by our cockpit camera on another occasion. It appears dramatic, but the experts say it should be perfectly safe.
With any approach, if you don't get it right, you can float too far or you can touch down too firmly. So those manoeuvres are always very carefully evaluated, planned and trained for, such that it should be within the spectrum of an average pilot to carry them out perfectly safely. The team with the G222 had practice on Thursday. We watched the practice and that has gone without incident.
And it must be said that this accident does no credit to the aircraft itself. Yes, the landing was a bad one, but the type is designed to use rough strips, and it should be able to take punishment. Here's a similar approach by a C-130, also filmed at Fairford. Once again, the arrival is nose wheel first, which does no credit to the pilot. But the rugged C-130 shrugs it off without fuss. As for the 222, it took 4 hours to move it from the runway. There followed a painstaking clear-up operation to remove all debris before full operations could begin again. Meanwhile, on a remote corner of the airfield, the aircraft was supported on sandbags as the damage was thoroughly inspected. It would be several weeks before temporary repairs could be carried out to enable it to return to Italy. But every cloud, it seems, has a silver lining. For the show's emergency team of volunteers, this was a day to remember, a day when their services were called upon with a successful outcome. They did a great job, and they made sure they wouldn't forget it.
One unexpected result of the G222 incident was that this aircraft got to fly in the flying display. This is a TBM 700 French Army VIP transport aircraft. Now, one of these has been at every tattoo since 1994, but usually in the static display. But there they were, ready and waiting, and were able to leap into the breach. Pilot here is Captain Vincent Agnus, and it's a single turboprop aircraft, this, and used for transporting generals and other important people around the place. But the display that Captain Agnus does doesn't look very VIP transport-ish. Single turboprops are becoming quite common for light aircraft in the transport world, and on the left wing there you can see that little black bulging thing. That is actually the weather radar, because of course normally you have weather radar in the nose of an aircraft, but with a single-engined aircraft with a big propeller in the front, of course you can't have it there, so you have to have it on the wing. You can see it on the pilot's left there. And that'll have spilt the VIP coffee. They fly these aircraft all over Europe and Africa. They have 8 of them and 2 Cessna Caravan aircraft. Vincent Agnus says that he's proud of the fact they're the only squadron in the French army with the TBM 700, and proud of the fact that they do this king of a job, as he says. Now a regular Royal IAT favourite, the precision and grace of the Patrouille Suisse, the Swiss national aerobatic team, in their F-5 fighters, the American Freedom Fighter. The Swiss Air Force don't use these aircraft operationally anymore, but they certainly look nice in their display team colours. They look like something out of Thunderbirds. They're a team of 6, and they take off in 2 Vics of 3. And they get straight into double wedge, Doppelpfeil, and then changing into their basic formation of Delta as they spear up through the clouds. Still just able to do their full display, because there's the blue sky on the other side. Led by Captain Daniel Stempfli. That formation is called Schwan, or Swan. See what an elegant picture they make against the background of the blue sky. The 2 solo aircraft break off from the main formation. That's Captain Daniel Siegenthaler and Captain Marcel Mühlenthaler. Opposition manoeuvres. The rest of the formation in box shape, but quickly changing as they go over the top of this loop into canard. Not a brilliant formation display aircraft, this, because it doesn't have a very good turning circle. It's not all that manoeuvrable. It's not fly-by-wire or anything like that. But nonetheless, they make it look very graceful. Now the tunnel, one of their favourite manoeuvres. The Swiss like their tunnels. These 5 aircraft making the tunnel shape, going quite slowly with their wheels down, and the 6th aircraft coming the other way at high speed to go through the tunnel. And as they come back towards us, they're building up for the finale grande. And a firework display as well.
In the inverted position. If you can, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands in the air and give them
So another display team. These are the utterly butterly wing walkers in their Boeing Stearmans, and they're always big favourites with the crowd, even if their circus act is rather frowned upon by the serious jet enthusiasts. But the Utterlies had an additional solo slot at the start of the show, which might have a little more relevance for the highbrow spectator. This rather nervous wing walker is Felicity Irwin, and she's here to drum up support for a rather different aircraft. This is it, the unmistakable shape of the Vulcan XH-558, Britain's Cold War nuclear bomber, not flying here at Fairford unfortunately, but she could be if Felicity's project is successful. The campaign to restore the world's only Vulcan to flying condition has been a huge success in publicity terms. Every aviation magazine has been full of it, TV programmes are being made about it, and yet the rebirth of XH-558 is far from assured. At this show, as at many shows, the fundraisers were busy raising the several £million still needed to make their dream come true. At the time of filming, the Vulcan is in small pieces at Bruntingthorpe Airfield, but progress has been made, and Felicity came down to earth to give us the latest news.
We've actually raised 1.5 million with the help of fantastic people who, about 15,000 of them, have become friends, and we're hoping to raise money at RIAT now. And $1 million of that is gift in kind from the original equipment manufacturers, who have promised to give their time and effort in assessing and repairing any of the component parts. So it's a marvellous sort of partnership effort, and we actually need another £2.5 million.
What is this money required for?
It's because we need specialist technicians. It's not a sort of job that anyone can pop in and do at the weekend. In order to put her back so that she flies safely, we need specialist technicians, and we're obliged to use Marshall of Cambridge to do that.
Has the CAA intimated to you that they will give this aircraft certification? What hurdles are there to be overcome?
We believe that the engineering programme is in such a situation that the CAA are giving it very serious consideration. The indications are at the present time, and we can't preempt anything, that we may well be very lucky, or we will.
What is so magical about this aircraft?
She's awesome. I think she's so big and she's so beautiful, and it's an odd combination in a sense. And I think her 111-foot wingspan and the noise of her engines is something, it's a once-seen, never-forgotten experience.
Well, a little before the show, the Royal International Air Tattoo director Paul Bowen assured me that when the Vulcan does fly, he's been promised its first public performance. Let's hope he's right, because it really would be fantastic to see this unique aircraft at Fairford. Whatever Paul has to pay to achieve that, you can bet he'll get it back in gate receipts. We'll now look around the static park at some of the many aircraft which didn't take part in the flying display. The giant Boeing C-17 is one we have seen flying here before. The RAF has 4 of them on lease stationed at nearby Brize Norton. Additions to the fleet are being considered. Also from Boeing, the NATO E-3A AWACS stationed in Germany. Truly an international crew with this aircraft, 17 men and women from 12 different countries. From a height of 30,000 feet, it takes just 3 AWACS to provide radar coverage of an area the size of Europe. The Alenia C-27 Spartan from Italy. It's from the same family as the G222, but has the engines of the new Lockheed C-130J, though only 2 of course. This is the third prototype of the C-27. It carries up to 44 troops or a 9-ton payload. The C-47 Dakota, military version of the DC-3. This one originally served with the US 8th Air Force. It then had a number of civilian operators in Europe. It's now flown by Aces High of North Weald. The Douglas DC-6 from Air Atlantique of Coventry. They also have 7 DC-3s and they're all working aircraft. The DC-6 is used for freight transport and can also be equipped for spray operations in the event of an oil spill. Here's its smaller hangar mate, also operated by Air Atlantique. It's the world's only airworthy Avro Anson. Built in 1950, it's powered by 7-cylinder radial engines of 420 horsepower. The Anson cruised at only 150 knots, but it had a good range of around 800 miles. Another British-built piston aircraft, the Miles Gemini, one of the first light twins built after the war. This was slower than the Anson. 125 knots was its top speed. The 200 horsepower Cirrus engines left it underpowered. This one is operated by the Bristol Plane Preservation Unit. They also brought this Miles Messenger slightly earlier than the Gemini. In 1942, 21 of these were ordered by the RAF as a cheap-to-operate personal transport. Now an aircraft that many people would like to have seen flying here. It's the world's only airworthy Sea Vixen, and it's new on the display circuit. The Vixen is in the colours of its last role with the armed forces. It was used as a drone. It's now flown by de Havilland Aircraft of Bournemouth. And finally, 2 more aircraft from the same operator. The de Havilland Venom, built in 1957 and formerly owned by the Swiss Air Force. And the more familiar Vampire T-11. This one got its permit to fly only a week before the show, following a 5-year restoration.
Back to the action on the runway, and the red, white and green colours can mean nothing else but the Italian Air Force. And the magnificent display team, the Frecce Tricolori, the 3-coloured arrows. The biggest jet display team in the world, 10 MB339 jet trainers. Taking off in 2 groups of 5.
This year, as one of the themes of the Royal International Air Tattoo, the show is saluting the world's bomber crews. Before the event, there was a guard of honour for veterans of the Second World War. These airmen survived some of the most intensive combat in the history of aerial warfare. At the height of the bombing campaign, Allied crews had only a 1 in 6 chance of completing a 30-mission tour of duty. And even then, there was no guarantee of respite.
We were the only crew to finish a tour in 2 months on our squadron. We were congratulating ourselves on having, got away with it. And our pilot came in and said to us, we've been invited to go to 617 Squadron. I said, you have to be joking. But anyway, the next day we packed our bags and that's where we finished up.
617 was, of course, the Dam Busters Squadron, made famous by its daring raids with the Barnes-Wallis bouncing bomb. Johnny Johnson was in the only aircraft to reach the Sorp Dam. Because surrounding hills prevented an approach over water, they had to fly along the dam at just 30 feet. This in a heavily loaded Lancaster at night.
Since we were so low, there was no question of very much forward travel as far as the bomb was concerned. So it was a question of dropping as near as possible to the centre of the dam. And we did this on the 10th run. As we came out, the dome itself was fused to explode at 25 feet, depth of 25 feet. As we came out, it actually exploded and there was a tremendous fountain of water. And once we'd circled and looked at it again, all we could see was that the crown was slightly broken, about 2/3 of the way along. So obviously we'd gone on to the right, we'd got it in on the right side and it had done what damage it could. But there wasn't sufficient damage to cause any real serious trouble.
Like many American pilots, Robert Burns flew his missions in daylight. His B-17 had a fighter escort, but its targets were heavily defended and often in the heart of Germany, on the limit of the aircraft's range. Survival required both skill and good fortune.
The role of the fighter was, of course, just as essential. We had to have them to have survived. But the role of the bomber crew, in my view, at least in that era, was just more hazardous. We had to fly straight and level, despite the fighters, black or whatever, to get our bombs where they needed to be. Yeah, I feared for my life. There was a time or two when I was sure that the next round out of an F-190 would be in the cockpit, and I was picking up cigarette butts off the floor, trying to duck it. But I was fortunate. I never had to apply a Band-Aid through the whole war.
Standing as a backdrop to this convention of World War II bomber crews was Britain's last surviving example of the aircraft flown by Robert Burns. The B-17 Flying Fortress, Sally B, is a veteran of more air shows than bombing raids. She's also known for her starring role in the film Memphis Belle. The crew often meet men who flew these aircraft in combat. Jim Jewell has 400 hours in the B-17, but never tires of hearing stories from the front line.
We're very fortunate and privileged at times to show the veterans around the aircraft when they come over to visit their old airfields and they come to Duxford. And all you need to do is ask the odd question and then zip your mouth shut and listen, because some of the horrendous stories are quite incredible and unbelievable courage as well.
Well, the magnificent B-17 flying here as part of the 60th anniversary celebrations of the 8th Air Force and also as part of the celebration of the work of the bomber crews. She's in Memphis Belle colours and there's ADF markings. A is for the 91st Bomb Group, DF for the 324th Bomb Squadron. Memphis Belle was the first B-17 to complete 25 missions over Europe, and they made a film about her at the time, and of course there is a much more modern version of the film as well, in which you see this actual aircraft flying. She does fly as a continuing memorial to the memory of the 79,000 US airmen who lost their lives in Europe during the Second World War. as they're described on the memorial wall in the Cambridge Military Cemetery, those men who from these friendly isles flew their final flight and met their God. They knew not the hour, the day, nor the manner of their passing, when far from home they were called to join that heroic band of airmen who'd gone before. But here she's with those two escort fighters that we saw earlier with the F-15, but now this is a more real situation because the P-47 Jug, the big fighter on her left, and the P-51 Mustang are the actual aircraft types that escorted these bombers. Because the American bombers did the daylight raids over Germany, the Royal Air Force Lancaster bombers and other types did the nighttime raids, but the daytime raids really needed the escort fighters. And until the arrival of aircraft like the Mustang, they couldn't be escorted all the way to the target, but Mustangs, which carried drop tanks, could go all the way to Berlin and back with these bombers and protect them from the predation of the German fighters. And the P-47 also had the range to do that task. This B-17 is an amazing venture. It's a private venture, and it's kept in the air by private monies. So anybody who can contribute to it is always very welcome, because it's very, very expensive to keep an aeroplane like this flying. And watching the display, veterans from bomber operations during the Second World War, veterans from America and from Britain. Especially invited to the tattoo, and gathering here at this part of the display because we're now beginning to build up to the memorial finale. Now they see the Battle of Britain memorial flight. Unlike the B-17, which is privately operated, this is funded and operated by the Royal Air Force. The Lancaster in the lead, the Hurricane on its right, the Spitfire on its left. Spitfire peels off, followed by the Hurricane. And we stay with the Hurricane for its solo display. A Mark IIC, this aircraft, the last of 14,533 Hurricanes to be built. And the Mark 5C Spitfire. This is a true wartime veteran. This aircraft came off the production line in August 1941 and saw operational service with various squadrons. Back now to the bomber hero, the Lancaster, the only Lancaster flying this side of the Atlantic. (7,377 Lancasters were built, and 3,349 of them were lost on operations. That's 45%. Now to an earlier and much smaller bomber, the Bristol Blenheim. This one is privately owned and rebuilt, operated by the Aircraft Restoration Company of Duxford. And this is the only Blenheim flying in the world. It flies in the colours of 82 Squadron of 2 Group Bomber Command, stationed at Watton. The markings on this aircraft, UXN, show it as one of an entire formation of Blenheims that were shot down whilst they were attacking Aalborg airfield in northern Denmark in August 1940. It was a Blenheim that carried out the first sortie, the first bomber sortie of World War II. September 1939, the first bombing raid of World War II against the German fleet off Wilhelmshaven in September 1939. And now a unique formation. This has never happened before. The RAF's Lancaster flying with the Aircraft Restoration Company's Blenheim in formation. The veterans standing in salute to this occasion. And the Blenheim lands and rolls slowly down the runway. Its Bristol Mercury engines just ticking over. John Romaine in the pilot's seat. He turns the aircraft towards the veterans in salute and comes to a halt across the runway. The Blenheim would have been joined by the Lancaster on the runway, but the crosswind is too great, so instead the Lancaster does a fly past over the top of the Blenheim. A World War II air raid siren sounds, and it signifies the start of a minute's silence in honour of the bomber dead of World War II. And the rest of the audience also paying their respects by remaining silent. Silence is ended by the arrival of 4 Tornadoes of the Royal Air Force in a missing man formation. Most of us can only guess at the memories that must be flooding through the minds of those veterans.
So a poignant moment to end this air tattoo tribute to the bomber crews, but that's not quite the end of the show. As usual, it's left to the RAF's aerobatic team, the Red Arrows, to close proceedings. Besides their flying duties, the Reds have been very much in evidence in their PR role. They've been at the awards ceremony for the Disabled Flying Scholarships, which are supported by the show, and they've been helping the Blood Donor Scheme, which has a stand here. The Queen's Golden Jubilee year has been a busy one for the Reds, and they've got a new manoeuvre to celebrate.
Probably the most exciting manoeuvre is about halfway through the show. It's called the Jubilee Split, obviously commemorating the Queen's Jubilee, and involves 5 aircraft splitting going upwards and the other 4 aircraft splitting on the way down. It's something brand new. It's a manoeuvre that's not been done before by the Red Arrows. It's obviously quite difficult to come up with new manoeuvres because the Red Arrows have been going now for 37 years, so there's only so many things you can do with 9 aeroplanes, but we try to keep it interesting, yeah.
So now, as the finale to the whole show, we'll see the Red Arrows display. The pilots in their red flying suits, the ground crew, who are known as the Blues, in their blue suits. Ground crew make this quite a military operation. Red Hawks taxi out in turn. 3 little pipes above the jet pipe there. They squirt diesel into the jet exhaust to make the coloured smoke.
Well, that display by the Red Arrows brings to an end a wonderful weekend of flying here at RAF Fairford. The weather's been just about perfect, as it always seems to be when the show is held here. Somehow the sun just seems to smile on the organisers, and it is all in a very good cause. Next year the show will be bigger than ever as we celebrate the centenary of flight. There'll be involvement from all the armed services, and it'll certainly be an event not to miss. But from now, from all of us here on the video team, it's goodbye from the Royal International Air Tattoo.